Be brave, be entrepreneurial. This is a fantastic country with huge amounts of great opportunities for design, for engineering, for tech. And don't just think that the world stops here.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Back and Forth. Today we have for you Mike Todd. Mike came through an introduction through Cynthia. We recently had her on talking about her company, Deeren and Associates, helping companies with overseas expansions and basically just guiding companies who have a great product, passioning what they do and then grown overseas. Mike is one of the key advisors within Deeren Associates that collaborates with Cynthia. He himself has a great, interesting origin story, which we will talk about with Mike. And well, I'll let him talk about it. He is mainly focusing on product development. I think, Mike, you yourself have invested in various products and so forth. Off camera, we had a very interesting chat, and I think you're going to enjoy this one because Mike certainly has a few interesting stories to share with us. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you very much.
You've spent a great deal of time as a submarine, as a young lad, right? Not yet a man, one would say, at 16. 8 years later, you decided to come out.
Yeah.
Right. What got you into shoes? Did you go straight into shoes?
No, I didn't. And I had a really interesting segue. So from leaving the armed forces, I still needed to get a job that I would have had to have tried to get if I'd have gone through university. Mm-hmm. So I sort of wrapped up my CV to say that what I've done is equivalent of. And I managed to get into a graduate training scheme with a retailer in the UK called Dixon Stores Group. And that is a little like Bingley here, that sort of big electrical retailer. And within sort of 9 months of the initial course, I was running shops across the north of England. And they were traditional, like a JB Hi-Fi, like Bingley shop with rows of washers, rows of cookers, TVs, Hi-Fis, etc. And I always say to people, even with my close friends and colleagues now, it was my favourite job. Okay. I mean, it's a strange segue between Navy and then getting into brand work, because what I realised and what cemented a lot of my thinking now is working in a shop, you got to understand the customer, because you were facing them every day. Yes. As the manager of the shop, I would have a dozen staff, and on Saturday morning, which was the big day to make money, that was the big trading day, you'd sort of send the staff out and they'd go down the shop, and little by little they'd come back up again, and I'd say, what did you sell a washing machine? Mm-hmm. And they'd say, no, we've asked that couple down there and they're just browsing. Yeah. And I'd say, is it sunny outside? It's beautiful weather, boss. And I said, so who browses washing machines on a Saturday morning when it's hot? Their washing machine failed yesterday. Yes. It failed yesterday. Yes. They're now going to buy one today. So the opening line always was, and traditionally back in the day, it was women, and they still do now, make a lot of the domestic decisions on product. Yes. But predominantly women were buying them back in those days. And as a male going up to a woman, and especially a young male, to say, can I help? They'd always sort of back off and say, I'm just browsing. And I always used to say the same thing, and I'd say, are these your children? And they'd say, yes. And how old are they? They're 5 and 8. And I'd say, you don't want to be down this end, because these are just 800 spin. You need to be at the other end, because they're 1300 spin, and you're doing a lot of washing. And 800 spin just doesn't cut it. You need a high spin washer, because you're going to do 2 loads a day. And they would invariably go, he knows a bit about washing machines. And as soon as you got them, or anybody interested in talking about the function, that was it.
I think you knew a lot more about washing machines. You have the power of observation and applying logic to it.
I was probably a bit arrogant at the time, because I would say to my staff, they just ask for the credit card, because they're going to buy at the point when you get in the functionality. Yes. And all the typical sort of sales training that you got at that time in the sort of the early 90s. But it was understanding the product and what the product did, and the functionality to the customer coming in. And that sort of gave me a grounding in things that I really found intriguing about product. So I was one of the first shops to get a new Dyson range.
Okay. So when did Dyson start?
That must have been going to market sometime in the early 90s, But he did 3,000 prototypes.
3,000 prototypes.
And
right.
it was a product changing from a functional item into an item of desire. You weren't just buying
That's
a
right.
vacuum anymore.
I mean,
You were buying a Dyson. And that was the thing that you left out as a piece of art, as well as a vacuum cleaner.
ingenious.
Yeah, brilliant.
Ingenious.
Yeah.
I mean, like anyone that can make a vacuum cleaner and a desirable product.
A desirable
come on.
product.
You fail to realize every item in there is to do some chore.
You could never, ever have made George Street, and you just said this beautiful sort
vacuum cleaners,
theatre of vacuum cleaners. That's not going to work.
Well, prior to that, I still remember in Australia, one of the biggest vacuum cleaner sales outlets was Godfrey's.
Godfrey's, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I remember the ad. I mean, the guy had a comb over, you know, a bit boily, and he was sucking bowling balls with a suction thing, which is effective at the time.
Yeah. But I must empty the Dyson, that sort of see-through tube, once a week. I can never remember emptying a Hoover bag.
With a Hoover bag, wasn't that a paper bag? They just
And all the dust came out.
Yeah.
And that's where Dyson thought, you've got a Hoover bag where most of the dust is just spread around. All you're doing is spread around the dust.
Right.
And he made looking at dirt a functional piece of his design.
Right.
You saw the dirt.
Okay. Wow.
So imagine that, where the design is going to be, so you want people to see the dirt? Yes. In a clear tube? Yes.
Well, now he's got lasers to even see the dirt as you vacuum, which is a genius thing again.
Genius.
It makes you want to vacuum more.
Yeah. Which is why he's just bought a $78 million apartment in Singapore.
Right. He's gone on hair dryers. There's this other item that he's got.
I don't think it'll
It
work.
was like an air breather or something.
It's an air breather with headphones. I look at it, and again, certainly on footwear, I've gone past brands that have gone on to be huge, and I never thought they would work. But my instinct is that this is going to be there and not there.
Do you think he's just having a bit of fun?
Well, I think he wouldn't be the first designer and producer to try and delight the market with something, to take out of it something that is an idea that may come next.
We call it a gateway product, right? Like it's create a bit of fanfare, in fact, almost get people to mock it a bit so they come back into the store again and reinvigorate the brand.
Yeah. If you read the Steve Jobs book by Jacobson, and he talks about that the iPad was first, the phone was secondary, and it switched once they'd found the ability to put smaller tech inside it, so that it was the other way around, and that was genius.
Many years in a retail environment where you connected people with their desired product that was relevant to them. So I can see the connection coming together now. And then you went from that environment into shoes?
I went into sports retail and then switched over to buying. So I joined a company in London, which was an airport retailer, and they had a franchise for a sports store in the middle of Piccadilly called Lillywhites. And Lillywhites is still there.
Lillywhites, why does that ring a bell, Lillywhites?
It was the world's largest sports store, sort of several floors of everything from football to equestrian. And it's beautiful, beautiful store. And I started working for them, and I was only in my early 20s. So I was running the airport retail shops, one in Gatwick and one in Heathrow. And it was predominantly selling golf-related products. And what I realized quite quickly, it was a Japanese flights that would come into my shop in Heathrow, and they would point at a magazine, and they would point at Lee Sharp. And Lee Sharp was a Manchester United player back in the early 90s. And they wanted Manchester United shirts.
Yeah.
And I persuaded the then management that the shop should be morphed from a golf cashmere shop into a football shirt shop. And back in the mid-90s, that was seen as, football was still seen as a game of thugs, and there was a lot of violence associated with it. And Beckham and the types of footballers we've got now was just beginning. And I turned the shop into a football emporium. And you would sell massive amounts of Manchester United shirts, Tottenham shirts, Liverpool shirts, and that then led me to buying. So I then went I was switched from the retail into the buying side, and I was the one who set up all of the accounts with the likes of Umbro, Nike, Reebok, to buy originally football shirts.
And what time frame are we talking about here?
90s, that was sort of 95, 96, 97.
Right. So a lot of these brands, whilst already established, weren't the size that they are
No,
today.
no,
Yes.
no.
Still a very organic process.
Still filling order
Yeah.
sheets in, data entry, no Excel. Having a data entry clerk who you would give a big buy sheet, and you'd have to fill everything in it, all the pricing,
Right.
and then that would be put into a mainframe. Working with things that people don't work with now, open to buy, which if you talk to any buyer, there are not a lot of really good qualified buyers out there that understand the beauty of open to buy to make sure you get the product in at the right time with the right sizes, etc., and budgeting control. That brought me into watching a product that was morphing from being just a simple football shirt into an iconic cultural dynamism of the UK. And it became part and parcel of youth culture. And I was up there buying product from Manchester United, actually driving up to Old Trafford to their superstore and picking out really bad product at the time. Like, I'll take 500 of the bears and I'll take, 400 rulers and some Easter eggs. Because they were all really bad products. Now you get, it's.
And where were those products made at that time?
That's an interesting point. They probably will all be locally sourced product from the UK.
Right.
Even Umbro, which was Manchester United sponsor at the time, they were making shirts in the north of England. So
Right.
Of course, it's all gone now.
No, it's all gone because I would imagine back in those days, good portion of the manufacturing that was
still
local.
done, local.
Yeah, and then would have been started shifting over to China during the 90s, late 90s would have been. Yeah. From there, did you come out on your own and start something
No,
yourself?
I got to the end of my time at Alpha. I was in my late 20s, and I recognised there was a bit of a gap in my own education. I'd sort of left school at 16, so there's a lot of connections in my sort of learning that I'd learned along the way, but I hadn't sort of formalised. So I paid myself through an MBA at a good management school in the UK, and then with that qualification joined Mizuno.
Okay.
Now I joined back in those days as an analyst, working across retail and buying, and working with the team, the brand team, product team, etc. And that got me right, sort of smack into the design of the shoe, mainly the shoes, because Mizuno was everything from golf, baseball, which is huge in Japan. I loved the running shoes because I was a bit of a runner back in those days, and I loved watching. I used to watch the product guys going off to China. And I'd look at the designs and I'd think, oh wow, you're going there and sitting in a factory and you're making this stuff, and then seeing some of the Japanese designers come in, which just intrigued me. I loved the Japanese design aesthetic, and that sort of got me onto a progression through brands. And I then went through a number of them over the last 10, 15 years, and like that whole process of making, and I still enjoy it now.
So it sounds like you've always enjoyed tinkling with things, trying to work out how something works, and it's a natural progression I can see going through where you came from into an environment where you actively investing in various products, brands, and then assisting other brands with their development, growth, and so forth. So there is a common thread that ties your journey up until this point. So looking at that timeline of things and working with the brands, I believe you've helped with over 50 brands with some level of development over the course of the years that you've been working in this industry. What do you think is the most profound change compared with the early days working with brands, years ago versus now? How have things evolved?
Oh, it's a really great question, and we talked a bit about it off camera. When you come to things in design, which I look at now, and I get disappointed with. So I look at, we talked about cars and how cars have changed over the years in terms of their design. Tesla is an amazing car, but it's not a car anymore. It sort of feels like an appliance. It feels like a phone. It's incredibly fast. But even the speed of it, people don't buy a Tesla to be fast anymore. Whereas you'd have bought an old Mini Cooper or a 205 GTI or a Renault Fuego or all of these incredible cars. You'd have bought them because they were fast cars. Ford Mexico, RS 2000s. Whereas now, this car's as fast as any of them, but it's sort of lost its beauty as a cultural youth product. I think design is something that I'm not strictly. I don't strictly believe we've got great design out there. it's great functional design, but it seems to be cookie cutter
Yes.
in terms of what you get. Every phone now is the same. There's
Yes.
no difference in phones. And it's almost impossible to see, albeit I'm sure there will be one, where the phone will change function in its design from where it is now. The software and what it does will be much improved, but
Yes.
the design of the phone won't. So I think that's something I'm very conscious about. I also think that product departments, they've changed over the years, where I used to love sitting through product meetings, and I say back in the day when there were long, arduous meetings where you would tinker with product, with the designers, with the product engineers, and you'd be all around the same table.
Right.
And arguments about collar height or colour or what materials you're using. Whereas a lot of that's done by Zoom now. And you lose, something is lost in that tech.
Yeah.
Again, they can be great products and they can be really well made, but is it what, I don't know, is it what we want? But maybe it's what we'll get, I suppose.
I despise anything that's communicated digitally, right?
Yeah.
Working from home is an oxymoron.
Yes.
It's an absolute
Yeah, it is,
oxymoron,
yeah.
right? What a lot of the young folks who all want this work from home, they don't realize is most of the learning doesn't actually come from reading the text. It comes from being next to someone and feeling their energy, not just hearing what the words coming out of the mouth, but feeling that energy
Yeah.
that comes with it. And that's where most of the brilliance, the gold lies. Unfortunately, it's lost on the young folks. And I think that's also true flowing into the lackluster design aesthetics that we have seen each year.
Yes.
It's gone, dare I say, homogenized to a certain way, There is no that quirkiness gone on the days, I mean, when we talk about cars, quirky design of a car, you think Saab, right? It's the most quirky design car ever, right? It's just some crazy Swedes that design a car.
And I've had a couple of Saabs in the past, and one of the things that really amazed me, radios and CDs and the tech is all buried in the dashboard now. But back in the day, you would slot in a really good car radio cassette. And then as it moved to the front coming off, because that was the anti-theft device, Saab created a tiny pocket on the underside of the seat. So you'd take your front of your tape cassette off and you would slot it into the front and behind the seat.
Yeah.
And I always thought it was an intriguing design that
Yeah.
somebody had to think of. Another one that I'm a fan of is the original Isogonis Mini. People say it's a bottle of milk and others say it's a bottle of gin. But it was big enough to put a bottle in the door. Now, where does that come from? Somebody's had to sit in a room with the designers and say, where do I put my gin? Where do I put my milk? And that's built into the design, which makes it quaint, unique. Old and young, experienced, inexperienced, all adding their thoughts into what should. I'm not saying design by committee, but I'm saying that these
Collaboration.
Collaboration.
It's coming together and collaborate and bringing some human element into it, rather than just leaving it to a cat designer or to a screen and use a template. Here's a template, make some changes, off it goes.
I like going high streets. I still like shopping high streets. I still like shopping in shopping centres, and I like watching, and Japan especially, if you go to Tokyo, it's just the most amazing place to shop. Looking at not only retail design, but products and how they're on a shelf and how it's there to tell a story. And there's not a lot to love anymore. There's pockets of things where you go, I like that. But then there's a lot of it where you go, it's just not going to work. It's never going to work.
Within this reality, how do you then engage with brands or with projects that you put your hands on and eye on, and where do you add value to that conversation?
So I'll put my deer-in hat on. So from a deer-in hat, we get approached by many different companies who wish to go international. So Australian companies wanting to go into foreign markets, and then products wanting to enter into Australia. We look at everything from the company itself, what they're selling, who they are, where they've come from, their founders, are they genuinely a company? Are they making money? Can they afford to do what they're doing? Then we analyze pricing. We look at what pricing you're going to sell it at. Will it work in this market? And will it work? Is there a demand for that product? And only after doing a lot of that pre-work do we say, okay, we can help. We turn a lot down because you sort of look and say, no, not now. And interestingly, without mentioning the brand, I've got a meeting with a company next week who I first pitched 6 years ago, and they were about 5 years old at the time. And I told them, don't, it's not now, don't hire me. I said, I can come and I'm sure you'll pay me well, but you're nowhere near ready. And I know that company at that time sort of thanked me. And I think I went home to my wife and she said, oh, how was the pitch? And I said, oh, no, they weren't ready. What do you mean? You turned them down? And I said, because they weren't ready. They just weren't, the company wasn't ready. Yeah. And when I went in and met Cynthia, which is a number of months ago now, and I looked through some of the leads and things that she was working on, and I said, oh, I know that company. And I re-met them again, and now they're ready. Now they're in a position of where they can export. In fact, if anything, they've too much on their plate now. So you've got a bit of an overlap. They weren't ready, and now they're, my goodness, what do we do now? Because there's so much demand. Now they need to make sure that demand is serviced in a logical, efficient manner. Otherwise, you just sow chaos.
I was actually having dinner with a client last night. So they've got a can of beverage. Let's just call it a can of beverage. This beverage at a different price point at different markets, right? But then they go into these developed countries, right? In these developed countries, the disposable income is different, right? So they have to then work out how much do we sell this product at? Then do we want to price it at a level where it's still a premium so people will desire more? Or do we bring it down to a more of a budget conscious level so we can sell more? So this is one of the most, I think, critical conversations a company needs to have.
Yes.
Because if you price wrong, there's your expansion for that country gone.
Yes.
And you can only do it once.
Yes.
Because you can't go back and say, oh, we changed our mind. Yeah. It's no longer $4, it's $1 now. You can't do that.
You can't do that. And at the same time, I've seen one of my favourite brands out of the UK is a brand of ladies' sandals called FitFlop.
Right.
I know the founder, and I know that when she created the sandal, it was created from her Bliss Health Studios, and she needed a sandal. So she created the sandal, and little did she know that she'd created a wobbling sandal. And this wobbling sandal moved your glute and actually tightened your glutes up. And a lot of women were going back saying, this is just, I've got a really tightened glutes now from wearing a sandal. Wow. And it was a mistake. Okay. Because it was a wobbly...
It's a wobbly shoe. So
she called it a wobble board.
How serendipitous.
It's brilliant. For years, I used to go, why didn't I, after working in footwear, never think of turning the word flip-flop into fit-flop? Yeah. It's a genius. Oh, I've missed that. I could have done that years ago. Now, their biggest market outside of the UK was the Philippines. Right. It still is. Okay. And they sell an awful lot of pairs in the Philippines. And they didn't change their price. They went out the same expensive. And you went, how have you managed to get this level of sandal sold into a consumer group that actually has less disposable income? Yeah. But they got into the fitness, that women buying things that had an output, which was this wobbling is going to give me a better figure. Yes. And when I first asked the distributor why they were selling that much, and he said the consumers aren't buying one pair, they're buying multiple pairs. They're waiting for the next drop. And they're having parties around the drop. So when the new item comes in, women who are all part of a same friend group would all get together for the next release of the product.
Like a frenzy or something.
It was almost, you weren't selling the shoe after that, you were selling the community of people who were buying this sandal. Now that's interesting because it doesn't automatically, it's not automatically part of the brief. You don't go out to do that. But because of its function, because of what the shoe did, the sandal, it created a community, and that community then waited and waited, and they were happy to buy at a price which, when you translated it back into a Filipino currency, it was expensive, like buying a new phone, and but they were prepared to do that.
I think it's no longer a pair of shoes now.
Oh no, it's not. It's you're part of a.
It's your badge of honor or something.
It's something that you're wearing that is, and there's a lot of things. I mean, UGG Australia was another one. I sold UGG, the brand, the Deckers brand, so it's Californian-owned brand. Whilst the UGG here is synonymous with Australian culture. I was selling that on my honeymoon. Right. Not much to my wife's chagrin. We had a local honeymoon because I was working, and we just went around the south of England. Right. And I would show this boot to some retailers. What do you think? And they'd go, oh, it's ugly. Yeah. It's horrible. What is it? It's a sheepskin boot. when would I wear that? And the tipping point on that was a picture of Pamela Anderson wearing a pair, sloppy Joe type of oversized track pants on, Ugg boots, child in one arm, Starbucks in the other, and fending off the paparazzi. She was getting into a big SUV. And what I never really understood at that point was that she, as an icon, was saying to a lot of young women out there, I can do this. I can work, I can look great, I can have a child, I can be famous. And what I didn't realize that it was building up a massive amount of stock. So 13, 14-year-old young women who were girls and women who were looking at this, they were going, when I can, I'm going to buy a pair of them. And they couldn't really afford them for 3 years.
Well, that was the earliest form of influencer,
that's
right?
That's it, earliest form of
Yes.
And that demand was coming like a tidal wave. You just had to manage production, you just had to manage logistics, and you had to manage finance. And UGG now is still 2 SKUs. In fact, it's not even 2 SKUs of it. It's really only 1 SKU, which is the short boot, because they don't do the long boot. It's still 1 SKU.
The other one we can talk about is Birkenstocks, right? That seems to just never go away.
Never.
It seems to come around every once a decade.
Yeah.
You know, it goes to become an ugly shoe, all of a sudden fad shoe. Now it's hot again, it's cold again.
Yeah.
It just sticks around.
It does. And interestingly, with Birkenstock, and Crocs is the same.
Yeah.
Mother and daughter will wear them. Now, that's a golden product. So if the daughter at 13, 14, 15 will wear Birkenstocks, and mum at 40, 45, 50 wears Birkenstocks, you've got 2 customers. That's unheard of. That doesn't really work. Birkenstocks have that. Same design.
And I guess it brings nostalgia as well.
Yes.
As you age through the years and you go, well, I wore that with my mum.
Yep.
You know?
Absolutely. So it comes back.
It comes back again and just,
Dr. Martens.
I used to love Dr. Martens.
Yeah.
I used to love
18-hole Doc.
I was one of the first generations of Australians that wore Dr. Martens when they first came over from the UK, right? And the bloody yellow stitching.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted that silly yellow stitching.
Yeah.
You know, and it was something to be desired, you know. It was just...
And that was delivered by a punk, cultural, aggressive, angry teen mob in the 70s who wore the boots almost ironically. So they wore them in a sort of an ironic way. And again, that sort of influenced a level which we didn't see coming. I didn't. I all invested in different things back in the day, but they were... and it's still there.
Yeah.
My daughter docks, Birkenstocks, Converse. That's she. You know, they're brands that just keep on churning.
Yeah.
Now, will they die? Maybe they will in the future. Maybe they won't. But getting that nirvana of design, desirability, delivery, and not tinkering too much, allowing it to just be what it is. And not allowing, not somebody comes, I'm going to change it completely. That's fascinating to me.
This is something I'm very curious with, is that back in the days, you have a product that was hot in one region, not in another region. Maybe the reason for that is we didn't have access to so much information.
Yeah.
We couldn't see in a global scale. You know, we just had our community, we saw our communities. And when that product was hot here, because another community had no visibility to this global phenomenon, as soon as it came to that, no, this is too different for us, we won't accept it. I have to imagine that in the current reality where we've got, you know, our phone, we've got so much consuming media, influencers and so forth, a product that's hot in one region can essentially be hot anywhere. Because of that access to that information, can I call it that? Do you find that in your line of work, when you're talking to brands, those borders or physical borders no longer a challenge for any hot product because you can just get a couple of influencers on it and it go like hotcakes? Brands
scale very quickly these days for sometimes no reason. So my daughter said to me a couple of weeks ago, I want a water bottle. Oh, no, I'd like a water bottle. Okay, so we've gone through 1 million water bottles. And she said, will you buy it and I'll pay you back? And I said, okay. And she wanted a Frank Green.
What is that?
Well, Frank Green it's the must-have water bottle.
Is it?
It's really. I've
never even heard of it.
And I just knew about it as a brand, and she'd She got a little moon on the side of it, which is another $5 for somebody to stamp a moon on the side. The kids now, this is part of their uniform. It's Frank Green, it's this, that, and the other. So I don't know where Frank Green goes from being just a water bottle. I think it's going to have its water bottle days, and then as soon as it goes out of water bottles, I don't know whether the company...
Sometimes your hero product is so much of a hero,
and
it kills off any other...
and you've set a whole company up to sell water bottles, and then the CFO comes in and says, we're 30% down on water bottles, and you go, well, what else are we doing? Nothing. So the company sort of, is it really a company, or is it just a money passage?
Yes.
It's just, we make some money, we close it down, we get out. So there's that side of it that intrigues me. The other side is, and I got this from one of the products that I brought in, the Free World walking shoe. I helped it at a trade show in Germany in June of this year, and it was the first trade show that they'd done, and we set the trade show up for them, and we manned it, we did the stand design, etc. And they'd never, as a brand, they'd never been out of Australia before. And what I was intrigued about at this ISPO, and I've done a lot of ISPOs. ISPOs, it's a show in Cologne, and it's been there for 30 years, and they'd had a hiatus because of COVID, and this was the second time the first post-COVID show was a bit small, and this was the first show in a sort of really, we're back. And what intrigued me this time was that in all the ISPOs I've done before, the buyers or the distributors or the press that were coming to you were all interested in performance. That's what they were buying. Whereas at this show, unless you had a sustainable story, they weren't interested.
So it's all gone to climate sustainability route.
So sustainability is sort of usurping design in a way. You'll be forgiven a little bit for the product, but if you can prove you're sustainable, that's the hook.
I have a lot of problem with that.
Yeah, no, I do.
I have a lot of problem with that.
It's because it sometimes isn't sustainable.
Yeah, because you're forcing things when things are not yet ready to be what it is.
Yeah.
And therefore what you're going to create is this falsehood, this bedrock of fallacy, and people are going to profit from it.
Yep.
And it's often going to be the biggest guys because they can have the clout to do it.
Yep.
Like Apple with their recent huge launch about the green carbon, and I think the comment was something like, "Oh, and we source quality carbon credits." Can you please define quality, please? You know, because firstly, the whole carbon trading scheme is a scam. It's a sham. It's not police. No one can monitor it, right? How then you're turning into this thing that is not yet being proven, in fact, by most expert commentators to be false. And then you rebrand it, put a nice logo on it, and then this becomes your hero.
That's it.
And it's just wrong.
This product it's got a lot of good design and sustainability to it, but it was almost as if that was the only thing that they were interested in. So it's like a frenzy of buyers and distributors just roaming around the show for something that was going to tick 5 boxes first. And that's what I'll take back to Voss. That's what I'll take.
That's almost appeasing the narrative of the time, because it's like, well, if we tick those boxes, our product can be anything. People are just going to buy on that.
They're going to buy for that alone.
And this is where your design goes out the window, doesn't it?
You're compromised. Yeah. There's a compromise in it. And I've always said the best form of sustainability, and again, I hate to come back to cars again, because the best form of sustainability is second and third life.
Yes.
If a product can actually have a second and third life, that makes it ultimately sustainable. So growing up, I loved getting my cousin's jeans. You know, as soon as he grew out of them, I knew I was getting them. I knew I was getting his t-shirts. And that became a big thing in the family. So if my mum went to see Auntie Pat, she'd come back with a bag, and I'd go through the bag, and these are new. But they were getting a second life. Whereas now the churn of product, and it worries me, iPhone 15, it's a great product, but you're 15 iterations into something where the 14's not dead. We
are going to talk about this Apple thing with the push for this climate, carbon neutral product and so forth. We're going to talk in our 360 News that we'll be filming for this fortnight. Instead of saying, well, this product is full carbon neutral, how about just stop releasing phones for 1 year?
Yeah.
That's going to do a hell of a lot more.
Yeah.
Then you create a new banner, new packaging, and give your customers less and call it, we're more responsible?
Yeah.
Come on.
Are you a Star Wars fan?
I love Star Wars.
So what amazed me about the first film of Star Wars was it showed you a scene with an amazing sort of gravity floating ship outside, and Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi were sitting in this sort of underground house, and they were wearing rudimentary clothing with a very techie amount of things around them. And it sort of made me think way back in the day that what was I looking at? Was I looking at the future, which is there'll be a certain amount of things which will stay very same, but there'll be other things which will be automatically made, AI made, which are unbelievably technical. You really won't understand what it does, but it does a million different things. But you live in a very sort of normal, quite almost Bedouin style, but you've got a lot of tech. And I sort of get that feeling that it's going that way. It's sort of, we're going to have amazingly technical things, but other things are going to be quite rudimentary.
I'm pretty confident Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan, they were wearing Birkenstocks.
Well, they could, I think if you looked into that robe, he's got Birkenstocks. Birkenstocks. They wanted it, or DMs. I can't believe it. DMs are still there after all these years.
So you've got some products there.
There's a couple of things that I thought were intriguing to bring in. This is one of the products, and we quickly went through it off camera. This is a company that is an Israeli company that has contacted us. This comes from equestrian, so they've gone from an equestrian product into motorcycling. This is an inflatable vest. So this here connects to your bike, and if you come off the bike, this pulls a gas cartridge. This fills this vest with air, and if you fall off your bike, you're effectively going to protect your upper body and neck area from damage. This is not a particular new design. There's not a lot of them in this country, but what intrigues me is the data coming out of new riders. So certainly through COVID, there's been a lot of new people getting into motorcycling. So motorcycling business is very buoyant. There's a lot of women now. The percentage of women that are getting onto bikes is far higher than it's ever been, which means that as a young woman, you're going to have a mum or an auntie or a dad or a brother who's going to be quite worried about you being on a bike. So they're going to promote safety. And if they're promoting safety, you need a safety product. I look at brands like this and go, there is a market there waiting to be expanded. So if we get the pricing right, if we get some of the local marketing right, this has got a good chance of working. Not specifically, it's a really well-made product. Being Israeli, it's got a little bit of sort of tech cachet that comes out of Israeli products because it's quite a techie, forward-thinking tech market. This is a good product to get into the market, and you're looking at the data and saying, actually, this will work if we get the foundations right. I was going to bring the canister in, but they're en route from overseas. Sadly, not by you, which I may have come in quicker if I'd have got you to do it. I should have done that.
We will appreciate the introduction.
I'm bringing canisters in to test these because I want to test it myself. And I'm sure a local distributor said, does it work? So you're going to have to test it. But you don't get into a car which has got an airbag and say to the guy or girl in the showroom, can you bang the front bumper so I can see this airbag working? I need to make sure. So there still is some education to go because people will not believe it works. Whereas you believe that your car will work once, and that's what it needs to work.
Well, I own almost the identical style of that for my equestrian pursuits. I don't wear it often because when I'm sort of just training and practicing, I just wear my very thick, polyurethane type of protection, right? Because I know that it's there. I don't have the confidence to wear that, even though I owned one for almost 2 years now. Because it is that canister, you harness onto the reins and what have you, and your saddle. So if you do fall off, it pulls and
that's interesting.
That pops out, right? I'm confident it works because it's a reputable manufacturer. But at the same time, it's like, well, I've got this thing that is thick layered. I know it's definitely going to work. So I gravitate towards that. So, I think education is going to be the key here.
Just said something which I hadn't connected is that you can fall off a horse quite a lot. You wouldn't want to fall off a bike at any time. Never. So in a way, you're sort of selling something which you hope will never work, but has got to work every time you use it. It's got to be the potential to work. And it's crafting that narrative which makes this interesting.
And I think the appeal of that product there is to have that very low profile protection. Well,
Yes.
it's essentially just a lovely jacket, right? It is protection when you need it.
Yeah, and this company is actually doing a built-in technology that they're using here into motorcycle jackets.
Yeah.
So you'll wear a jacket that inside it has got the tech.
Yes.
They need an ability to take in and out the cartridge where you can use it as a normal jacket. And you would also need a piece of tech that was married to your phone that said, would have noticed that you're getting on your bike and we noticed that your air cartridge isn't in. So before you get on your bike, you've got to put your air cartridge back in.
Yes.
So I think there's a lot of design that you could work on to make that all of this tech work together.
And I think they can even bolt on some smart trackers.
Yes,
on there as well.
absolutely. Yeah.
You know, so a lot of data, key vitals, and so forth.
This company here is now a bit of a disclaimer. I invested in this company 3 years ago.
Right. Back to your shoes.
Back to my shoes. Back to sort of something that I truly love. This was a company, Free World Australia, based in Brisbane. I advised it on some sandals 3-4 years ago because I was always interested in recovery, and there was it's now commonplace. A lot of brands have them. Nike, Ufos, which is a good big brand, and Under Armour, etc. And it was all to do with that post and pre-sport. What do you wear down to the gym? What do you wear after the gym? And it was all about massaging the feet and making sandals a lot more, rather than having a sort of a jandal flip-flop, they were a lot more designed around the foot. Always interested in that. Helped this company design a sandal. We were launching it, and I was in Singapore doing some distributor work in 2020. Got back in touch with the founder and said, everybody's wearing masks. There seems to be people going in to get testing. What is this all about? And of course, that was the beginning of COVID. And he said to me, what do I do? And I said, well, you close shop, or you use this time, and if you can afford it, you start designing, because now this is the time to really get into R&D. And we set off on a project to create a trifecta, which is recovery, comfort, and walking. And I brought in the walking shoe, and this is called the Bay Walker. And what we wanted to do is create a sports-inspired walking shoe with comfort in forefoot and heel. But we also had this really great idea, or quaint idea, if you call it, of integrating coffee, because we were big coffee drinkers, and as you walk, you meet friends and you discuss things, and it's all about coffee shop to coffee shop. So this particular model has old coffee grinds infused in the midsole, which is a nice sustainable story.
That's right.
It's certainly not saving the world, but we're starting to use materials where we can reduce the need for EVA in this midsole, and using recycled products to pack into here without losing any of the sort of elasticity that you get in here. We brought on a podiatrist late in the design, and I'm pleased to say, and we did laugh at this the other day, he said, what you guys have done, he said, is almost perfect. He said, I wouldn't have designed it any better. Who advised you? And I said, well, nobody. I said, we went out and did our best for creating what we thought was a very comfortable walking shoe.
Right.
And he said, it's amazing. He said, you've nailed it, other than the few tiny things that I'm going to help you on. And we do like that. So it's quite wide. It's got a really good bounce on it. You do roll through it. Fully recycled material. We've got to work a little bit on the insole, which is what we're working on now. And what I'm advising this company on, and of course with me being part of it in a very small way, is that we're selling here an Australian design. It's made in Korea. We like the Korean factory network. Why can't this be a new Hoka? Why can't we go out and be...
Well, for me, it's more attractive than a Hoka.
Yeah, and it's more attractive, but it's designed here. It's got a great name of Free World Australia.
And not many sneakers are made in Korea these days.
It's not cheap. So the price of this is quite expensive.
It's mostly Vietnam, China, Thailand, Indonesia.
But what we wanted to do, and I've done a lot of, I've done a lot of factory work over many years, and I wanted to be able to say to the consumer here, I can walk into this factory, you can meet the owner, I can show you the people who work there, and you know that what we're doing is the best for people who work on the factory floor. I think he's created a great product. Like a lot of these brands, it will need a bit of luck, and it will need finance.
And how are these products being sold? Where are they being sold?
Israel, this product, and it's also selling in France, mainly with equestrian connections in France. So where it's first real international market in Australia. We've got a distributor that knows Australia, loves Australian brands,
Yeah.
and he's got a great network, and he's got pick and pack,
Yeah.
and he's got credit control,
Yes.
and he's got available funds to buy.
Right.
So a bad pun in a way, it's got to run before it can walk, and it's a walking brand. So it needs to keep very tight, it needs to get the design, it doesn't need to over egg the pudding,
Right.
it needs to be patient,
Right.
because this is not going to happen
Yes.
overnight. With a little bit of good luck and the walking trend continues, I think it can be a brand that we can look back in 3 or 4 years' time and say it's arrived on the market.
This is being sold on its own platform, online,
Yep.
on website, and into various sports stores.
Across Australia, they're in some traditional shoe stores. It's getting into podiatry practices.
Yes.
Again, podiatry is a really interesting thing because podiatrists now are shoe shops giving away
Right.
foot advice.
Right.
They're
Yes.
not foot advice
Yes.
selling shoes, so
Yes.
their margin comes from being
Yes.
a shoe shop. The brand is onboarding onto Amazon, not for these yet, but
Yes.
for the sandals. But Australia's not a big market. I mean, it's not
Okay.
going to sell. You know, it's a volume here. What we could do across 1 year, you could do in one order out of Korea.
Right. Right.
So, a lot of things we advise Aussie brands, especially Aussie brands, is their volume is outside. It's not inside. It's, you know, as I wrote yesterday, there's 24 million people here. There's 37 million people in Tokyo if you take in the total city.
Australia,
tiny, tiny
that's one of Australia's biggest weaknesses compared on a global scale
Yeah.
is our lack of population.
Yeah.
We're a small market,
Yeah.
and it's all the difficult for companies when they're building products and have a great product. They want to go to find manufacturers, and the manufacturer's like, "What's your order?
Yeah, it's
Where's your market, Australia? Okay, already like." Normally we just produce surplus stock and give it to the market type of thing. It's an afterthought.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of barrier there for a lot
Yes.
of Australian product
Yeah.
creators and so forth.
Yeah.
Because your orders are simply too small.
Yeah.
And you're not on the blip. You're not even a blip on the
Yeah.
big manufacturers that can actually do the work.
Yeah, I sat in London in June after the trade show in Cologne. I went to see my brother, and we sat in Sloane Square, lovely square in the middle of London, King's Road, running
Yeah.
off it, and Sloane Street. There's a little bar in the middle, and we sat there and watched the world go by on a Saturday. And I think we counted tens of millions of dollars of supercars that went round Sloane Square. Everything from McLarens to Ferraris to Lamborghinis, an amazing amount of cars. And I couldn't help but feel very disappointed that there wasn't a beautiful hybrid, incredible designed and made Holden. Why wasn't that there? And what Holden, I never really quite understood why it didn't do this, is that it didn't need to make 300,000 cars a year. It needed to make 5,000 really, really good cars at $500,000 to $1 million each. They should have been going around Sloane Square, and you'd have had small scale, high tech, beautiful engineering, but instead.
Well, they didn't
brand's
have
been
you
killed.
advising them, you see.
Well, maybe they should have brought me in. And I know government had a lot to do with it. Australia does very well to be high-end tech,
Yes.
small volume. We're never going to be big
Yes.
in terms of our capacity to make, unless you leverage the brand
Yes.
and you leverage it in licensing.
Yes.
But we should make the best of great things expensive, and you're selling here.
Top 3 advice, just to wrap up, Mike.
Yes.
You've been very gracious, giving us a whale of time. Top 3 advice for those viewers looking who might have a product or an idea, so forth, that are looking to establish themselves in this market and grow overseas. What is your top 3 advice?
In no particular order, pricing.
Yep.
Make sure that if you're that entrepreneur that's working in a garage and has come up with this great idea, make sure you price it correctly. So you've got to understand that chances are you're going to make it maybe here first, and then you're going to offshore it to somewhere that's going to be more efficient in scale to make.
Right.
So make sure you can understand the pricing.
Price correctly.
Price correctly. Don't be afraid of travel, because we're a long way away from everywhere. I mean, we are the tyranny of distance. We're right down at the bottom of the world, and that most of the action is either right above you in Korea and Japan and Singapore, Malaysia, or it's all the way across there in Europe, or it's the other side of the world with America. You've really got to think that, you've in order to meet customers, you've got to get on a plane. You've got to go and smell the market. You've got to feel the market and understand where your of what your potential is. And I suppose the last is be brave, be entrepreneurial. This is a fantastic country with huge amounts of great opportunities for design, for engineering, for tech, and be brave. And don't just think that the world stops here. We've got great weather. I know we all like to go out to the beach on a Saturday and we want to close the office at 5, but sometimes, you know, that little bit of
Got to work your ass off.
Got to work hard.
Got to work
and
your
if
ass
you
off.
really do
Yeah.
it, that's a big old world out there that you can sell to, and sell Australia, sell the culture, sell the people, sell the weather, sell the opera house, sell everything, because that's what you're selling. People want that as part of the journey.
Fantastic.
If you get that right, you'll have a successful time.
Wonderful. And I would like to add, just to wrap up, ask for help. Never be afraid to ask for help.
Absolutely.
From the likes of yourself and Deere and Associates, you know, because wealth of experience
Thank
right
you.
there.